They didn't survive because they were fearless. They survived because they were prepared in ways school never taught you. The Vikings didn't just endure the cold, the sea, and constant war. They engineered their entire lives around them. In my last video, we looked at 3 Viking empires almost no one talks about. Now we're going inside their world. How they stayed warm at -30 degrees Celsius, sailed blind through storms, and walked away from battles they should have died in. This is how Vikings actually survived. Let's start with the cold, because this is where most people get it wrong. Vikings didn't tough it out. They managed heat like engineers. Their clothing wasn't primitive, it was layered science. Wool was the backbone, not cotton, not linen, wool. Why? Because wool keeps insulating even when it's wet. Rain, snow, sea spray, sweat, wool still traps heat. Their clothes were layered deliberately. An inner linen layer pulled moisture off the skin. A thick wool tunic trapped warmth. Outer cloaks were tightly woven to block wind. And here's what school never tells you. Viking cloaks were often fastened with brooches that allowed airflow control. They could vent heat while working and seal it shut when standing still. That's temperature regulation, not brute toughness. Inside their homes, they did the same thing. Longhouses weren't drafty caves. They were low, long, and sunken into the earth for insulation. Thick turf walls, sometimes over a meter wide, trapped heat. Fire pits ran down the center, and smoke filtered out through the roof, coating beams with soot. That soot wasn't a flaw. It sealed the wood, prevented rot, repelled insects. Even the animals mattered. In winter, livestock was often brought into attached spaces. Their body heat warmed the house. Nothing was wasted. Now let's talk food, because no one survives winter without calories. Vikings didn't rely on farming alone. They diversified like survival strategists. Fishing wasn't seasonal, it was constant. They dried cod into stockfish, a protein-rich food that could last for years without refrigeration. No salt required, just wind and cold. Meat wasn't eaten fresh unless necessary. It was smoked, dried, or fermented. Yes, fermented. They fermented fish, dairy, and even meat. Why? Because fermentation preserves nutrients and prevents spoilage. It also made food digestible during winter when fresh plants didn't exist. Milk became skyr, a high-protein yogurt still eaten in Iceland today. Whey wasn't discarded, it was reused as a preservative. Every calorie had a purpose. Every scrap had a second life. And when crops failed, which they often did, Vikings didn't panic. They foraged. They knew which lichens could be boiled into edible paste, which tree bark could stretch flour during famine, which seaweeds carried minerals missing from winter diets. This wasn't desperation, it was inherited knowledge. Now let's move to the sea, the most dangerous environment they faced. Viking ships weren't just fast, they were adaptive survival tools. Long ships were flexible, literally. Their overlapping planks allowed the hull to bend with waves instead of breaking against them. That meant survival in storms that would destroy rigid ships. They were shallow drafted, letting Vikings beach almost anywhere. No ports needed, no infrastructure required. But the real genius wasn't the ship, it was navigation. Vikings sailed without compasses, without maps. They read the world. They studied wave patterns to detect land beyond the horizon. They tracked seabirds, knowing certain species never flew far from shore. They watched cloud formations that only formed over land. And when visibility vanished, they used sunstones, crystals like calcite that polarize light. Even through clouds or fog, Vikings could locate the sun's position. That meant direction, even in near-total whiteout. This wasn't myth, it's physics. Now let's talk war, because Vikings weren't just raiders, they were survivors in violent landscapes. They didn't fight fair, they fought smart. Armor wasn't universal. Most Vikings didn't wear chainmail. Why? because it was expensive and exhausting. Instead, they used layered wool and leather, which actually absorbed slashing blows. A sword cut that didn't slice clean was often trapped. That moment could mean survival. Shields weren't static defense. They were active weapons. Viking shields were lightweight, designed to move constantly. They punched, hooked, trapped blades. Shield walls weren't just walls. They were moving machines. Psychological warfare mattered too. Vikings understood fear as a weapon. Their appearance, their war cries, their unpredictability, breaking morale often mattered more than killing. And here's the part school never teaches. Vikings avoided unnecessary fights. Raids were fast, targeted, and strategic. They struck monasteries not just for gold, but because they were undefended, coastal, and symbolically powerful. Survival wasn't about glory, it was about efficiency. But the greatest survival advantage Vikings had wasn't physical, it was social. They didn't survive alone. Communities shared resources. If a farm failed, neighbors absorbed the loss. If someone died, their family wasn't abandoned. Laws were memorized, not written. Disputes were settled in assemblies, not constant blood feuds. Even violence had rules. Children learned survival early, not through lectures, but observation. Skills weren't optional, everyone contributed. And women played critical roles. They managed farms while men sailed. They controlled keys, literally, symbols of household authority. They preserved food, managed resources, and maintained social stability. A Viking household wasn't a single warrior, it was a system. And that's the real truth. Vikings didn't thrive because they were stronger than everyone else. They thrived because they understood their environment deeply. They designed their lives around reality, not comfort. They respected nature. They adapted to it. They prepared for the worst before it arrived. And that's the lesson we never learn in school. Survival isn't about being fearless. It's about being ready. The Vikings weren't reckless barbarians. They were cold climate engineers, master navigators, strategic fighters, and community builders. And in a world that keeps getting harsher, they might have more to teach us than we realize.